Welcome back to another episode of London's Blue Podcast live. That's right. If you're listening to this on a podcast feed afterwards, this is a live match reaction to Chelsea's 1-1 draw versus Crystal Palace, a whimper into the international break. It looked to be a bright and sunny day in West London for Chelsea, for Enzo Maresca's side. At the top of it, that first half put us in the pole position, but just like McLaren today in the F1 race, kind of absolutely second half went to pieces. You know, there's a lot of things you can point the finger at. You can point the finger at the officiating. You can point the finger at failed or missed chances. You can definitely make a lot of excuses there for why it didn't go Chelsea's way and why they are sharing the points with Crystal Palace. In this little bit of a live match reaction, we're going to talk about what was working and then what ultimately didn't work for this Chelsea side. But I think in general, the vibe might be a little off considering the fact that Chelsea did have every possible opportunity to take 3 points today, to solidify their position, to get a home win in front of the Stamford Bridge faithful, and were not able to do that at the end of it, particularly when you look at the fact that the expected goals for Chelsea, 2.27 to the 0.44 for Crystal Palace. It was one strike from Eze, one special moment that absolutely put Crystal Palace back into this. And I think, Nick, at the end of the day, as much as we would want to point fingers at what the officiating led us to, what the Palace opportunity, time wasting frustrated us. In general, this comes down to Chelsea not taking their chances, which has been a consistent theme over the past couple of seasons.
Yeah, this reminded you a lot of last year, didn't it? A very winnable game that you don't quite turn the screw enough on, and you come away with regret. And again, we're coming off of a very poor result against Servette. You can talk about the pitch. You can talk about all the excuses that you want to. Sure, we advanced, but it was not a good performance. This is your chance to get 6 points in the Premier League, go into the international break with some real momentum in the league. And the team, first half looked fine. Second half completely looked out on their ass in terms of fitness. And that's going to be a big concern, I think, moving forward for me. I think that was the number one takeaway, is like it was so sloppy because I think the fitness was all over the place in the second half. Obviously, you're trying to integrate pieces from the transfer window in and all the other things that are out there. But I really took away from the second half that fitness is going to continue to be an issue for this team playing, 2 or 3 games in 7 days in this year of, potentially 70 plus matches. So I really hope they get it together. I hope the international break is restorative for everyone after a crazy end of the transfer window and all the new pieces and all that sort of stuff. But it's pretty clear after today that Maresca has a pretty big job on his hands, and we'll have to see how they react.
And when you look at the breakdown first half to second half, you had, again, total match, 5 big chances, 13 total shots. Of those 13 total shots, 7 on target. But when you break it down, the first half, which is where Chelsea felt to be in the driver's seat, as it were, with this match, they had 7 total shots. 3 of them were on target. And then obviously kind of came good with the Nico Jackson team goal that we put together in the 25th minute. And when you flip it to the second half, we had 2 big chances, 6 total shots, and then 4 of them on target, which equaled the same amount of shots that Palace had in the second half, 6. And then of those, 2 were on target. And really, they were all a second half team. That represented 2/3 of their total shots. They had 9 shots in total, and really a big performance from Dean Henderson as well. If you were looking between the two sets of sticks, Dean Henderson, the much better goalkeeper on the day. Bob did not have Robert did not have a good day out as it related to his performance here. I think maybe just in general, are you walking away feeling good about some of the performances that you saw today, even though it was a draw, even though we kind of walk away sharing the points, and does not put Chelsea into the best position heading into the international break? I mean, do you think there were a couple of least brighter performances from a couple players, but who did you kind of take note of?
So I'll just kind of start off by saying, like, right before the game, Nico Jackson gets the long rumored contract extension,
Yep.
right? And I think that is I think from a protocol perspective, the club has shown for all of the other things that we talk about that if you do perform, you will get improved terms. I think that is the whole accelerator, part of the contract and the wage structure that currently exists. So Nico gets a bump. And I think that's a very important thing, especially after you fail to go get any sort of striker help, whether it's an Osimhen who would have been a guaranteed starter or some sort of backup in this window. You're basically telling Nico, you're the guy now. Like this is you're the center forward, and anyone else in the team is going to have to play second fiddle to you. So him getting the goal today is incredibly important. He had two chances in the 92nd minute, 93rd minute, respectively, that I was just begging to go in because I think that just would have been a capstone for him on a relatively impressive day. The other one I want to call out, Dan, I think this is a really important one, is Cole Palmer deciding to play deep line midfielder because of the way that Palace were set up. That was one that I did not really see coming because of his, so far under Maresca, we've seen him so far advanced and kind of leading the line in parts of play. The way that Palace were set up is essentially like a 5-4-1 setup. And so they were very wide and very compact. And it was really difficult in the first like 15, 20 minutes to figure out how to break them down. We were trying to go around them from a width perspective, but Palmer at one point in the first half, and I think this was, a change to the way that we played, said, fuck this, I'm going to play a deep lying midfield role because our midfield was all over the place again in this game, and dropped some absolute dimes from midfield. And I would argue was our best midfielder on the day, despite that not being his position. This was I think a tactical switch, but also just some really intuitive play from Palmer, who you sacrificed a little bit of his own glory to help the team connect play because our midfield again was completely it was left wanting for me personally.
Yeah, if I wanted to point out a couple of players that I thought had a better day and are showing progress, again, not perfection. When you draw Crystal Palace 1-1, I would say that you can't necessarily put too much praise on any one individual player. But I actually think the duo of Fofana and Colwell had a very good day out. And particularly when you look at the fact that you have, Malo Gusto basically playing as a midfielder in that inverted role for the majority of the match. And then you have Cucurella playing extremely far forward, which puts really a lot of pressure into a one-on-one scenario for Levi Colwell. You look at Levi's heat map, he had to cover a lot of that left channel, and it is bright red the way he stepped forward, the way he kind of played some passes. You look at some of his kind of stats, 3 out of 5 ground duels won, 4 out of 4 aerial duels won. Like he was, I think, a little bit more impactful, putting himself into the position in this game, really finding a way to contribute. And then on the other end, West Fofana, kind of same, in terms of ground duels, won 4 out of 6, and then aerial duels won 1 out of 1 in this match. But yep, I think they generally had better performances. West was almost like a right back in that regard because he was kind of having to push forward, really cover that channel. I think, we talk a lot about, why goals happen, why we concede. I mean, really, nobody stepped up to Eze, which gave us gave them rather the opportunity to shoot and convert. But I actually think in this day, if that hadn't happened, we would be talking about the fact that Chelsea had their first clean sheet, that Chelsea our first clean sheet in the Premier League this season. We would have been talking about the fact that our defense looked a little bit more resolute in that regard. And I just don't want their performances to go under the radar, because I think in general, this showed and it gave me some additional confidence that, our defense is sort of starting to figure things out. But I think, as Elliot puts in the chat here, that basically the clean sheet challenge is almost mission impossible for Chelsea at this point in the journey under Enzo Maresca.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just not convinced right now from like the setup perspective and what Malo Gusto is being asked to do and what Kukurea, I think Kukurea had a pretty great game overall in terms of the amount of coverage he was doing, but it just feels scrambled all the time. And I think you saw that with the way that Fofana was being asked to cover multiple areas. He ended up playing right back for most of the second half, it felt like, right? Like he made multiple runs in that you would have expected Malo Gusto, obviously, who goes off with a hamstring injury to do. You have Caicedo making that coverage on the right side, which CFC Central previewed earlier this summer that was going to happen. It just doesn't feel. It feels better, I guess, but it doesn't feel great to me yet. And I think that's largely because the midfield is completely non-existent right now. Like there is no added layer of friction for an offense to have to run through before they get down to the defense. I will say that, on the goal that we scored, Levi steps out brilliantly, makes the right pass out. Madueke takes it down. Palmer makes the right pass across. Jackson finishes it. That was a quick, easy, wonderful counterattack where Levi actually starts the play. And I'm pleased for him because I think, he's had a bit of a rough start in terms of, defense, but it looks a little bit better in that regard today. I think the rest of the team, Neto was kind of meh, if I'm honest. I obviously the combination of Felix and Mudryk and all the subs was kind of meh because it didn't have a real great impact. But I think as Nick puts here, and this was anytime you head into the international break, this is like your moment, right? Can Maresca make significant impacts for the players who are going to be at Cobham over the next 13 days to turn the screw and get more consistency in performance out of this team? I would say that like Madueke was fine on the day, maybe not great or as great as he was against Wolves. So it's about like everyone lifting the level a point or two out of 10 than anything else. Because I think once you do that, the space that Eze has to shoot closes down, right? And those moments, we know about those moments. The sliding door moment happens where Will Hughes doesn't get sent off. And then it's like, what is it? 6 minutes later, they equalize. I mean, these things in the Premier League, you can it's automatic that if a sliding doors moment happens, that something comes after, right? So I think everyone lifting their level up half point or a point out of 10 is going to be critical.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, we would absolutely be, I think, justified in hammering the side for not finishing their chances. Like that is, I think, the most important criticism, right? Like we had opportunity to win this game. We had opportunity to take our shots. The players did not deliver. We had an opportunity for Maresca to make different changes and didn't necessarily make changes that made the team on the pitch better, that improved the level. I would say maybe the movement of like Neto off was kind of like the one that was probably the most interesting and required kind of some thought there within Felix, but it was not the best type of upgrade in that regard. But I do want to take a moment, because if we don't talk about it, people will be like, I can't believe you didn't talk about it. We can't go too long on it though, because if we talk about it for too long, we're just going to be seen as complaining about the officiating. Gillette's comedy hour. Like I know we didn't do a traditional 3-word match review at the top. Like that is absolutely my headline for this one, because you see how the inconsistent state of refereeing is absolutely changing the dynamic of matches, within the fact that Chelsea probably should have been going up against multiple players on, yellow cards or potentially on second yellows with even the first half. The Hughes one, I think, is the most egregious that you could point to, when a player is getting pulled down, heading into a shooting position in front of the box. Like that is, without question, anyone else is getting a yellow card. And you saw Chelsea players, again, the Nico Jackson one, rightfully deserved, because that was, I think, a very just unfortunate decision from him. But like this was just an abjectly horrible officiating performance from Gillette. I mean, like he was Crystal Palace's one of their best 4 players on the day.
I I seriously, I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and the Premier League has been so bad when it comes to refereeing for so long, but the inconsistency is the thing that is maddening, right? Early in the game, Neto gets a yellow card for a slight tackle on a breakaway, and like, look, I think we're all semi-conscious watchers of the league. Like we understand that 7 or 8 out of 10 times that is going to be a yellow card. If you stop progress on a breakaway, it probably should be a yellow card. Like I'm okay with that. I'm okay with Neto getting a yellow, even if it was soft. What I'm not okay with is the very next time down, Kamada does the same thing, doesn't get a yellow card, and you're just like, okay, so that's interesting. Pause there. When Will Hughes, who, by the way, on a yellow card, a deserved yellow card, takes down Madueke and then escapes that, looking really, really guilty, in the second half, then takes down Palmer, who is, a star boy. And, you say that star players don't get star treatment. I think you're lying, because that is a thing that happens here. Like, how is it possible that there's not a second yellow here? How is it possible that I think for 3 of Chelsea's players, their first foul is a yellow card, and Kamada's on his fifth foul, doesn't get carded at all today? I just these things really blow my mind. And again, we've had terrible luck with referees. I think every team goes through their ups and downs with referees. So this is not to say like all is lost or we need to start an inquiry or whatever. But Chelsea also didn't react with enough fight after that moment, and I think felt aggrieved but didn't do anything about it. And that is the thing that, like, if I were Maresca, I would hire a referee just to do bullshit calls in scrimmages over the next 2 weeks during the international break, and just coach it into their head that we are going to consistently get the raw end of the deal, and we have to react better. We have to be better than what the refereeing level is. We have to go play faster and stronger. Like we saw Cole Palmer get pretty upset in the second half again with the refereeing. He turned it up for a brief period, but we need everybody to turn it up at that moment instead of just accepting like, oh, woe is us. We're never going to get a car. Like it's wild.
Yeah, and I think, as Elliot kind of put in the chat here, Kamada didn't get carded yet. You would figure after 4 or 5 fouls that at least one of those would have risen to the level. And I think we're not saying that, oh, woe is me, but it's more a desire for the standard to be raised in order to make matches better officiated, to make them, I mean, ultimately should make them cleaner, should make them more fun to watch, should make them more engaging, should keep and raise the level of fitness in terms of like protecting players, because let's just say, again, sliding to a moment, they're down to 10 men. Malo Gusto might get the opportunity to come off, to rest, to not potentially put himself in a situation where now he's suffered a hamstring or kind of a non-contact injury issue. He's off. I mean, that's probably, again, one of the other big things that happened in this match is that not only had we gone through a couple of matches now, obviously the Lavia injury was, not necessarily something that kind of happened in a match, but now we have a situation where you're looking into the international break. You're looking at the fact that there's some type of hamstring injury. No update, again, as of time of recording. We're doing this live right after on what the level of that injury is. But if that is serious in any capacity, if it's a 2-week, 4-week, 6-week type of scenario, you need Reece James back immediately after the international break, and he hasn't had any footballing minutes since preseason. So like this is going to be a very concerning period. Otherwise, you're going to look at, is Disasi going to deputize? Like that's a lot of question marks for what's going to happen to the defense if Malo Gusto's out for a significant period of time.
Yeah, I mean, all 18 center backs that we have are probably going to get some run out if that's the case, because I mean, I think the worst case scenario now, right? Without a healthy Malo Gusto, and it did look like he locked up pretty bad. And the way he was walking was was not the walk of someone who is, going to be okay tomorrow. It looked like he was pretty locked in. So I would just say this: like the worst case scenario for Chelsea is if Reese isn't ready and you rush him back, do we start the cycle of horror all over again that we have been a part of? Or do you just accept that until October or whenever that Reese is healthy, that Disasi or maybe even Fafana with a Tosin next to him or some combination thereof is going to have to do, and that's going to create a lot of imbalance. I mean, it's almost going to invert Kukurea right away. If you can't have the flexibility to invert both sides, it's going to, I think, make Caicedo's job a little easier because he's been asked to do a lot on that right-hand side, but you're not deep enough at midfield to really even consider rotating him back to the right back, as Sam, our good friend CFC Central, thought might happen at some point this year. Your midfield is not deep. That's potentially a big spell of trouble coming our way, Dan. I mean, this is not going to be good. And Gusto did suffer some injuries last year, but not as much as Reese, obviously, who missed the entire season for better or worse. I mean, this is a really critical component to our team.
Yeah, I think as we're getting questions or kind of different points that people want to discuss about the match, we had a question just asking about, just want to talk about Enzo Fernandez and his performance in this game. And I think there were spells of bright moments, but it felt like flashes of goodness and a general averageness throughout the remainder of it. I think that you kind of look at some of his stats on the day. He was 4 out of 6 on ground duels, won, didn't have to challenge aerially, lost possession 19 times. I think in general that there was nothing happening in the middle of the pitch. I mean, when you have a back five, you've got that kind of mid block going on where Palace are really putting themselves in a position to stifle anything happening kind of centrally. Everything was having to go out to the wings. Everything was having to go out to the wings and then cut back in diagonally or come from some type of cross. There wasn't going to necessarily be a lot of space and time for Enzo or others playing centrally to do a whole lot. So I mean, structurally, Palace set up to frustrate Chelsea and did a fantastic job frustrating us and putting us in a position where we did not feel super comfortable, I think, in definitely multiple phases of the game. But I think you would have hoped for more from Enzo Fernandez in this game, particularly some of the passes where if he had played him in, timed it a little bit better, you would have been set up in a situation where the goal scorer wouldn't have had much to do to convert that chance.
I was told off multiple times in the first half for suggesting that he looked out on his ass. From a physicality standpoint, he got dominated physically today. Obviously, the losing the ball 19 times, not great if you're a central midfielder. I know he was asked to do even deeper work, post Gusto injury in the second half. I'm not really counting that as much as just his pure midfield performance. He could not get it together at all today. The passing into, short central areas was really tough for him. He blew a couple balls out wide that were easy for him to complete. I mean, it's just, yes, there are always a few moments, Nadir, that he really comes through and does well. But overall, like, this is a 115 million pound midfielder who, against Crystal Palace's midfield, particularly Will Hughes, he should absolutely be dominant. Like, that's the standard I hold him to. Like, everyone's telling me that is who he is. He is him. And I've seen him shrink away from some of these challenges multiple times. And it does make you wonder how he fits in this team. Because I looked at what Cole Palmer was doing from a deep line playmaker perspective. I thought he was much better than what Enzo was giving us today. And losing the ball 19 times against a team who wants to sit back and counterattack is horrific. It's bad. I mean, you can't tell me that is good in any single way. And even like late in the game where, it looked like we had a couple of breaks on either out wide or over the top. There was just nothing to be found there. He looked completely gassed. And this was similar, by the way, to everybody killing Caicedo last week against Wolves for having a very similar poor performance after they were forced to play the Thursday into the Sunday. So I think you could see this as a consistent trend for the midfield until, Lavia gets back or Dewsbury Hall learns how to play central midfield, that we might just have a stinker of a performance in midfield, depending on who's being asked to start those Thursday matches, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, again, he did have a couple of good balls, good opportunities to impact. It's just a desire to improve the level of consistency. I mean, we're asking for consistency from a lot right now. We're asking for consistency in officiating. We're asking for consistency from our midfielders. I mean, just comparatively. So just if you want to kind of example, because obviously we said, 19 times lost possession. What does that mean for a midfielder? Moises Caicedo, he had lost possession in this game 6 times. He actually had a really kind of nice performance. Ground duels won 8 out of 12, one-on-one on his aerial duels, 1 in this match, 2 clearances. I mean, in general, strong day out for him, having to cover a lot of territory with how Chelsea were pushing forward in this game. I mean, in general, I think there's a lot to kind of say there.
But I mean, you should be able to say this, Stan, without being too controversial or negative, as I am called multiple times.
You're setting me up for failure here.
These two in particular that should be
Right.
the linchpin of the team, and for me, because of who they are and why we brought them in, should be a minimum 7 out of 10 every single week. Like, they should be a minimum. Like, that is their floor for me. Like, they're both incredibly talented footballers. They have a great set of skills in different places, right? They both do different things. But come on, man. Like, you can't drop a 5. That's what Enzo dropped a 5 today for me.
I'm going to tell you, SofaScore, which we use on this podcast, has him at a 7-1, just in case you're wondering what the score was here.
Fraudulent.
Caicedo with a 7-5. Again, just
fraudulent.
Don't shoot the messenger, please. I'm just giving you what the consensus, the database consensus is. Apparently, Nate Silver was at the match, 538 Nate. So we'll go data heavy in this one. I think Nick Keller making the comment that Caicedo is one of our best consistent players. You almost rely on him to put in a good shift. I think this was another example of him having to carry a whole lot. And I mean, I think this is kind of a challenge for our midfielders too, is when you have really dedicated more players to the attack and attacking phase. I mean, you saw, how far forward or inverted Malagusto was. You saw how far forward Cucurella got. I mean, it does put a lot of additional pressure on Enzo, Caicedo, and then our 2 center backs to really step forward, step up, and win their one-on-ones. Like, you cannot lose out on those one-on-one opportunities. And I will say again, I think this was another strong Caicedo performance, but we're going to run into the situation with, where's Lavia when he comes back after a national break? Is he going to be kind of fit enough to contribute? I mean, we did see Cassidy was on the bench today, most likely as some type of, I'm going to guess, midfield cover in this scenario. And then to your point about Cole having to drop a little bit deeper, I mean, Cole only had 2 shots in the entire game. Like, that, you want way more from Cole Palmer in the attacking phase in this game. And if he has to go so far back, if he can't necessarily involve himself, particularly both of those shots, one coming from a free kick opportunity and then one coming from a shot outside the box, like, you want him way more engaged in the attack. And now, again, he did get the assist on the day. Great to see his contribution continue this season. Probably puts him on track for somewhere between 15 to 20 assists if we can convert all those opportunities that we get an opportunity to put in front of him, or he puts on plates for others. I think just in general, things that don't make sense necessarily yet that need some adjustment over the international break.
I mean, he had to drop back. I mean, if you remember the first part of this game where we were, I think, struggling to figure out how to break down kind of the compact nature of this like 5-4-1 that we were up against, there was no link between the attack and midfield early on because the midfield was kind of struggling to figure out how to get the ball moving. So Cole dropping deeper was a way to connect the play. But you're right. I mean, where is he most dangerous? He is most dangerous up front, doing shifty things, scoring goals, getting assists. If he has to play, what was essentially for me like an 8 kind of, but he looks like more connected as a 6 in this game than Enzo was even at times. Like that's just a way to I think break down a little bit of the compact nature of their 5-4-1, but it was not good enough to get us multiple great chances at goal from that deep line position, even if he was moving the ball a little bit better. So I totally agree with you. I mean, the trade off there, I don't think I would have that very often this year, but we may come up against teams, Dan, that just decide that they're going to try and shut down all this brilliant attacking play that we can muster, and maybe he has to play that deeper line playmaker role because it's a necessity.
Yeah, I mean, I think we also saw an example today, as Andrew's kind of pointing out here, Jackson playing 90 minutes every game, asking or saying that we would be great if we had another reliable striker other than Giu as the backup option from a central attacker in that front line. I mean, I will say, and I think this is, where some controversy kind of comes into play today. Like there were chances that you're like, man, Jackson, like how could you not kind of convert that? There was the side netting. There was the very, very late chance at the end where, boy, oh boy, like that would have been another phenomenal moment for him. The humorous goal celebration with the flashback to the Turkish shooter during the Olympic Games. Like again, there's a lot to like about Nico Jackson. And I think the fact like he is still on trend for having a very, very strong initial return as a striker in the Premier League. I think what you would hope for, or you would have wished for at the end of this window, that you either had a direct competitor for him to push him forward as a player, or someone in the Giroud mold that we had talked about when we were discussing Osimhen or Tony, that could give us confidence that if Nico Jackson was off it on the day, that you could throw them in and he would be able to help push the team forward, unlock someone else. I think in general, like I'm not displeased with his performance overall in the day. I think anytime you as a striker take a goal, put it in the net, I think you have to have, say that it was a good performance. Was it a great performance? Not necessarily. Like, I think in general, like this was an opportunity for him to continue to showcase his talents. I just, when you're really struggling to get the ball into good positions, like you want him to not have to do all the work himself. You want to get him the ball in spaces where he can kind of take it and convert it. I think in general, like this is there's still goodness there with Nico Jackson, and I'm going to keep the faith on him, but I can see why some people are frustrated. I just would caution. I think I would give him more patience than I give a lot of other players on
Yeah.
the team, and it just always comes down to like who is your favorite. I would ride with Jackson much longer than I would ride with someone like Mudryk, in instance.
Oh yeah, I mean easily. I mean just the production alone is like a no brainer. But yeah, I think it was like a 6.5 for Jackson today. I think that's fair. Like again, I'm not uh unable to see through I like Nico Jackson. I have a bias towards Nico Jackson, but there are times where he gets completely lost in the play and he doesn't, connect the play and do some of the Nico Jackson things that we've seen him do. There are times where he misses easy chances. There are times where he makes incredibly hard chances, come to fruition. He's an interesting footballer in that regard. But I do believe that we're in this place with Nico where it is ride or die with him now. Like we obviously did not sign a backup. We're showing a ton of faith in him. I think there's a ton of attacking talent around him. I think the interesting part of, especially when Felix came on today, which I think we should talk about, Felix decided that he was just going to make the same exact run as Nico multiple times in this game, and that cannot happen. Like, obviously, they need to build a rapport together if they're going to be on the field at the same time. Felix being a little bit of a second striker to Nico's striker in this regard, but multiple times they made the same exact run in the box or to the right spot or whatever. And I just like you need players doing different things. Like you have to.
I'm actually surprised that we didn't see something where when Felix came on, or even when Nkunku came on later, that neither of them played centrally, and where you would have potentially pushed Nico out to the left. We saw last season a couple of times when Nico played out on the left. It really unlocked some opportunity again. That would have been very interesting to see. I think more so than really a left-hand side that was, I mean, Mudryk, Enzo, and Cucurella, which is not a left-hand side that is going to give you a ton of possession or even really attacking thrust in their current
Yeah.
capacity. I mean, you're going to get some ball movement forward, but it's a little disjointed. It's not necessarily a complete situation. I think that's what you saw us trying to kind of, okay, how do we switch it over to the right hand side? How do we do something with the, at that point, the Nkunku like right hand side? I think also maybe you make that sub a little earlier. I mean, Madueke in general, like I had some good defensive work rate within this game too, in addition to kind of how he was carrying the ball forward. So I mean, I think it's nice to see, again, frustrating end result. I do think though there are some things where it's like, hey, Madueke didn't have a great game out at the end of it all, but I think the progression that we're seeing with him as a player in this season so far, very, very, very good. I think I would just, you would hope that he would kind of, again, can he develop now the consistency? We only saw him for 1,400 minutes last season. Most of that was at the end of the season. Several of those came as subs versus versus starts. So in general, we're seeing him improve his attack. We're seeing him actually get involved in the defensive phase of the game, which is necessary when you're tucking your right back into midfield and you're asking your right-sided center back to absolutely own half of the pitch. Like there is absolutely going to be moments where he was needed, and I do think that was something to at least that I got excited about.
Yeah, I was surprised that Nkunku wasn't the first attacking sub, I guess. I don't know why if it's just like a minutes management thing, I don't think he is a winger. And I think to your point, like pushing him inside instead of someone like Felix maybe makes more sense in this regard. But, again, if it's minutes management, then whatever. There's no more 18-month injuries. I'm fine with the draw to Palace if we don't have to deal with that again. But yeah, I mean, you could easily see Felix playing a little bit more of a tucked in left, Nkunku through the middle, maybe frees up Palmer to kind of play that rover kind of roaming role that we've seen him play before, where he just kind of pops up wherever and tries to make something happen. It was just a little odd to me. And I think your point about Jackson out wide, that's not really something we've seen to this point, right? I think that the club has now overinvested in wingers. We have 118 wingers, including one Jadon Sancho, who was unveiled right before the match today. I think the place where Jackson is going to get pigeonholed is going to be as that 9, and maybe won't have the flexibility unless it's on a counter attack to play more of that winger kind of free roaming role that we've seen him play before.
Wonderful individual in the chat, Brandon Busby, asking the question here: was that a bad draw? 2 points dropped or 1 salvaged? I mean, I think in general we're going to go with the former Nicholas of 2 points dropped, considering that we were in the winning position and then conceded. Agree? Disagree?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think it's a fair result, to be honest. Like, I wish we would have played better to deserve the win, but I don't really think we did. I think we kind of took our foot off the gas in major parts of the second half, and had my greatest fear with this team, which was a lot of meaningless possession around the horn and back and around the horn and back. It was just kind of meh for most of the second half. So I don't, I think Palace didn't really do a whole lot besides frustrate us, but I think the broader context is that's probably a deserved result.
So thought exercise time. We're heading into an international break. Chelsea have lost the game to Man City, have won a game against Wolves, who maybe this game is showing us the level of Wolves is not even as good as we thought it was after that result. And then a draw against Crystal Palace in the league, obviously advancing in the Europa Conference League against Servette, though 1 win and 1 loss, and a win in the tie on aggregate, not the most convincing. If you could ask Maresca to fix one specific thing, so not in general, like don't concede goals, right? Like that's too general of a thing to try to go fix. But if you say like, hey, I like to see the way that this player is used, or to abandon a specific part of the stratagem that he is trying to use, the strategery that he is trying to put into place, what is that one specific thing that you would want Enzo Maresca to try and address?
Um, the midfield. I
Be more specific. Like, what
so
about the midfield?
the
The
midfield
composition?
in defensive transition specifically, because I think you have seen multiple teams cut through us like butter in a transition where it appears that there is no midfield there at all. Like I mentioned earlier, no point of friction. You know, even if Caicedo is winning 6 of 8 ground duels in transition, it just feels like the team is in full panic mode. And I think that there are ways to fix that if you have the right partnership in midfield. And, you know, I think that's going to largely be an Enzo Fernandez problem. Can he adjust his game, or can we build the team to maximize his strengths instead of his weaknesses? Because I think we're maximizing a hell of a lot of his weaknesses right now and not getting a hell of a lot of the net benefit of him as a really talented player. But that defensive transition is just tough. I'll throw a second one at you, Dan.
I asked for one, but I'll let you have two.
Yeah, but I'm one of the hosts of the show, so I think I deserve a second one. I would love to figure out if there's a way to get Nkunku and Palmer to hang out in the kind of maybe inverted tens or inside 10 roles together in a
Hmm.
team. I know that would defeat the purpose of a winger, and we can't play 18 attacking players at once. But I would be interested if there were something of a partnership between those two really talented footballers. So throwing it out there.
Well, you have comments in the chat, like Andrew saying he'd ask Maresca to fix Lavia's hamstring. I mean, I guess fix all the hamstrings. That would be a good one. Bat night with the giving Enzo a break and then trying someone else in midfield. And then also saying that defensive cohesiveness, feel like we'll just concede for sure. I think if I were to ask Enzo Maresca to try and fix one thing or address one thing, I'm I'm so down on what our goalkeeping situation looks like in this moment. I don't know if Jorgensen is the answer. I think we probably have loaned or have on loan our best goalkeeper at the moment. And like that's not saying anything because I actually don't think our goalkeeper situation as a club is good at all. I actually think it is one of the weakest pools of players we have at the club in this very moment. You
Agreed.
had opportunity to go recruit players that would have helped elevate this position, and we're not there. And so I think I would ask, like, what could you do with either Sanchez or Jorgensen to put them into a better position to be successful? Like, I think on the give up today, like that was sort of like Eze had a great moment, but I mean, even Sanchez just doesn't seem to always be connected to what's going on in all phases of the
Yeah.
game. A little his distribution questionable. I mean, he came up a couple of times and grabbed a clearance, but I mean that's I think standard, right? That's the expectation for what your keeper should be able to do every time. You look on the other half of the pitch, you look at what Henderson did for Palace today. He kept them in that game and he helped get them a point. And like I have zero confidence at this moment in time that Sanchez is going to do that. I've got very limited confidence after watching the Servette match with Jorgensen that he's going to be capable of doing that. And so I think trying to figure out how we put our goalkeeper in a position to like try and mask or cover up for them gonna be really huge because I think this is another season where we're heading in a trajectory where the goalkeeper is going to cost Chelsea points, where we're going to go from wins to draws, draws to losses. And I think this one is maybe less on him today, but in general, I have a huge concern about that position. And so, yeah, I think that would be my hey Maresca, how do we fix this?
I did a little sub tweet on Petrovic's I'm Chelsea fans, I love you. I'm going to Strasbourg tweet. And I was
Okay.
like, I'll see you in the new year or next season, whichever comes first. And I think that is basically kind of where we're at. Like, I think he's our best goalkeeper. He may not be the best goalkeeper with his feet. I think you could argue that we have a bunch of Kepas right now in goal. Maybe Sanchez is a bigger profile and thus isn't going to always give up the long range shot into the upper corner. But I agree with you. I don't think the goalkeeping situation at the club is nearly good enough. And you look around the league at some of the goalkeepers who you wouldn't consider to be like an Alisson or something, for example. they're still, as you correctly point out, able to help their team rescue points, right? And I agree. I think that is going to be a situation where we look at in November and go, oof, there's a deficit here.
All right, so I want to go through, as we're chatting here now, the post-match press conferences are completed. We have Maresca's comments on the day. I think we're kind of getting asked, like, what did he say in there? So I'm going to go through a couple of the highlights, and then we can talk about them individually. On the draw, Maresca said, we completely deserved to win the game. We controlled the game. Overall, we completely deserved to win. Unfortunately, we didn't. The performance is very good on and off the ball. After we conceded the goal, we lost our way. I think most that's pretty fair from an overview. I mean, if you look at just XG, maybe that's what I looked at, like XG. Oh, yeah, we should have won. On Hughes getting away with the red card, it was probably a second yellow, and they would have gone to 10, and the game would have changed, but the referee saw it another way. When he asked about, it was asked about the defense. First of all, I'm always concerned. It doesn't matter whether it's a clean sheet or not. We conceded a goal, but we didn't concede any more chances. On the Gusto injury, looks like a muscle problem. We will see. On the Jackson contract, on Nico Jackson's contract extension, the only thing I know is he's signing a new contract. I don't know how many years. I'm very happy. Nico is doing a fantastic job with us. He scored again. He had more chances, but we're happy with him. Asked about the failure to sign a number 9. Obviously, the collapse of the Osimhen deal in the final hours of the window. I had faith. The club also, even before in Jackson, we trust Nico. When the transfer window is open, I said he was doing fantastic things with us. So Spence is an opportunity to bolster his guy, the only guy he can ride with at this point in time. Make sure to turn that negative question into a positive on whether VAR should intervene for yellow cards. I think it's the correct way, but if you ask me the same, I don't think there are many things to add because it was clear for all of us that it was a second yellow card. The only one who thinks otherwise is the referee, and he's the one who decides. Do love that. I do love a manager getting a little spicy about the officiating. Anyone you want to talk about there? He had some comments about Sancho and the failure to sign the striker that got asked again. I can go into those in a second, but there were a couple of comments there. Any reaction?
I think it's a little contradictory to say we deserve to win the game, but after they equalized, we lost our way. It just seems to be a little at odds with each other. And look, I mean, he doesn't really have any choice. Like, I love Nico Jackson, but he doesn't really have a choice but to say, we love Nico Jackson and we fully support him. You don't have another option. So, like a lot of this kind of feels lip servicey to me. I'm kind of surprised he took the bait on the refereeing question. A lot of, Premier League managers will just totally stay away from that and go, ask them. That's not for me to comment on. And so, I'm a little bit surprised he did take the bait there. But yeah, I mean, overall, it's kind of I know there are a lot of people who love his press conferences and think he's like super straightforward and all that sort of stuff. I'm kind of mad on him, to be honest.
So his last 2 comments, one on the Sancho signing. Jaden is a player. He's here, which is good. I'm glad that he's a football player when we signed him, not something else. He's here because we like that kind of player, especially against a low block like today with these kind of games. We have 5, 6, 7 chances here. There are not many teams that could do that, could do something like that to win the game. And then on a failure to sign the striker, we want players, but we want a player that we decide has to be in our conditions. If a player is not here, then it was not. We'll see in January. So forecasting potentially the future scenario. Do Chelsea go back? I mean, look,
maybe
Napoli have put him on an island. Like he is absolutely is not going to be associated with the first team. Was not registered in the Serie A squad this season. Like, unless Saudi comes in with like another big offer, which everyone was said that was not going to happen, like he is going to go multiple months without football and might be in prime condition to come into Chelsea in January. So like, who knows? Like this could still have a last and final interesting turn for the Osimhen to Chelsea type of scenario.
Well, and Antonio Conte is notorious for changing his mind and accepting people back into the fold. That's just what he does. He, really just loves that sort of thing and is not particular, Dan, at all about the way that he runs his team. So, yeah, I think there's a huge chance that Osimhen is looking at a different club in January. I think, the club, Napoli are doing a similar thing to what Chelsea have done with multiple players, right? Which is like, all right, it is on our conditions. You can, I think I had plenty of commentary about that on Friday. I'm not going to retread that territory during our YouTube live. So go check that one out. We did a transfer deadline day. summary and wrap up. But if you're Napoli, now you've like completely frozen him out. Like
Yeah.
that does nothing for anybody in terms of valuation of the player. It might make the player more open to accepting different contract terms for their personal, play, but it's a very interesting time for them because he's a big time striker who needs football. He's 25 years old. He can't go a year without playing.
Well, look, it is a situation now where Chelsea are heading into the international break. We do not see the men's team kick off again until Saturday, September 14th, which might be a blessing considering what the mood is at the moment after this match, but that will be away to Bournemouth. Please let Kepa start between goal and just pepper the goal with long range shots. Winning strategy guaranteed. Then we play Barrow in the third round of the League Cup on the 17th of September. We have West Ham away on the 21st, and then Chelsea host Brighton on the 28th of September, which will round out the month for us. 4 more matches. You have to think the expectation or should be that Chelsea win at least 3 of those matches.
Yep.
League Cup has to be a guarantee. I think the match against Bournemouth should absolutely be a bare minimum expectation than between the Brighton and West Ham matches. I mean, West Ham were in it for a little bit against City the other day and then got exposed because Erling Haaland is the Terminator. In fact, he came from the future and he is here to score goals, and that's all he does. And maybe take out Connor as well. And then you also have Brighton too, which has had a flying start to the season as well. So I mean, between the two of those, I would hope that one of them would be a win. What's your expectation for the rest of September after Chelsea come back from the break?
I think it really depends on who is healthy and available, and what they reconfigure from a midfield perspective. Like, there's some obviously very winnable games in there. Brighton's made me look like a fool so far this season, so that. And not for the first time. I've been a fool before. I will be a fool again. That is a guarantee. But yeah, they look pretty decent right now, and I think that could be a really challenging game. But they're also open in the way that they play. So if Chelsea are able to do what we can do against open teams, great. If we can bury Barrow early. That's a tough one to say. That would be a great game for a player like Mykhailo Mudryk, who is struggling to get some game time, and maybe kind of use that as like a Europa Conference sort of like second team.
You're really going to Mudryk before you be giving minutes to Sancho to get him up to speed?
I mean, Sancho might play right after the break. I mean, he might be on that left wing against Bournemouth. I mean, to be fair, no one has locked down that left wing place yet, right?
Correct.
No? So it is wide open. I think you're going to see multiple players get a run out there, and maybe if Sancho does lock it down, that creates flexibility for Neto to potentially go over to the right to spell Madueke or some combination thereof. But nobody has locked down that left wing. It is wide open.
Several positions still up in the air for who the guaranteed starter should be, maybe outside of Cole and Nico by default, along with our center backs potentially being, I think now Wes and Levi at the moment. Cucurella maybe. I mean, I think they're in. There's probably in Caicedo. Like, are we saying like 6 or 7 players are kind of like locked, and then there's still some open spots?
It won't happen, but Ben Chilwell is a pretty excellent left winger too. So
he was creating a lot of chances per game. So like, just kind of keep in mind. But look, we're heading into an international break. That doesn't mean the content stops. We got a ton of stuff coming out. We're going to have another journalist special. I think Matt Law will be back with us this week to talk about what went down in the Osimhen deal, why it collapsed. We'll be asking him that question. We also want to start to do a little bit of profile on Jadon Sancho to see what he's going to deliver. And then look, the Chelsea women's season is about to start very, very soon too. And we have to start talking about what they're going to be doing under Sonia Bonpastor. It's going to be a very, very exciting time for the Chelsea women's team. But look, that's going to do it for this live stream. Thanks for joining us after what was unfortunately a little bit of a dull draw at the end of it, but hopefully this stream on the Sunday was something you enjoyed. If you're listening to it after the fact, like him 5 stars, 5 stars on the reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Be great to give us a like and subscribe on YouTube as well, and then join in the Discord community for the conversation to keep it going all during the international break. But that's going to do it for this episode. So until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.